encourages big government, because conservatives spend too much on one area, liberals spend too much in another area, they get together, the Fed will take care of it. But what they don't fully understand is that when they create money out of thin air, they devalue the money. The money loses its value. The dollar is cheaper. Prices have to go up. And a lot of people, then they'll want to blame business people. Oh, the businessman is gouging me, or labor is too high, oil did this. But when prices go up, and they never go up uniformly. Right now, medical care costs going up at like 9% a year. Education costs the same. And so the money goes in different places. Speculation into the stock market. That all comes from the fact that our Federal Reserve creates this money and creates an illusion of wealth. And the reason we're getting a free ride is the dollar used to be backed by gold, and the world still believes it. But we don't have to have gold backing our money. All we have to have is a computer. We create these dollars, and we send them overseas, and they still take them. But my concern is they're going to quit. They're not taking them as anxiously as they used to. They don't have the appetite for the dollar as much. So the dollar is going down in value. And someday they just might reject the dollar. There's a theory, and it's worth studying, that Saddam Hussein got into trouble with us because he no longer would take dollars for oil, and he took euros, and that was a challenge to the dollar. And guess what? The Iranians have done the same thing. Mm-hmm. And Kuwait just announced the other day that they want more dollars for their oil. So this means that it might be cracking, and the foreign nations might quit taking our dollars, and that's going to have big ramifications here. I mean, it means more inflation and higher interest rates. Then we'll have to pay for the government that we're getting. Right now, we haven't had to pay for it. We allow foreigners to finance it, and they won't do that forever.
60 years ago, the military budget was 85% of the total federal budget. Today, it's down to around 12%, or if it's that much. But a lot of people think that it's important for us to keep the federal income tax in order to pay for our national defense. What is your position in this area?
Well, you know, we went, from 1776 or 1788 up till 1913, we didn't have an income tax. They might have been the good old days. Mm-hmm. I don't think you need an income tax unless you have a government that is too big and you expect the role of government ought to be something that it shouldn't be, or it's not following the Constitution. If everybody in Washington followed the Constitution, you would not need an income tax, because you could have a strong national defense with a lot less money, and you wouldn't have the entitlement system. And taxes could be raised modestly, maybe excise taxes, maybe a modest a tariff or something. The founders used tariffs early mm-hmm. on, but they were so small it didn't matter. But no, there's a lot of talk of tax reform, and there's always been talk, you know, whether it should be a flat tax or, you know, a sales tax or whatever. But that's secondary to the issue of spending. The issue is, why do they need so much of our money? Why do they have to borrow, and why do they have to print? And that's because government is out of control, and we've allowed our government to do things that they should never be doing.
I believe it was Harry Hopkins that said, tax, tax, spend, elect.
That's
and
it.
We've been doing it ever since.
And that's always been a challenge for me, because most people know that I've been pretty determined to vote against all the spending, and sometimes, you know, that can hit home, you know, because, you know, I have a lot of farmers in my district, and mm-hmm. I'm very sympathetic, and some of them struggle, but the way to take care of the farmer isn't to tax the non-farmer, to take care of the farmer, because the people who buy the food then, you know, end up paying more. So I think the real test of anybody in politics, if they're determined, is they have to treat all the problems across the board. Because once they capitulate and say, yeah, I'm for all this cutting except for my special interest, mm-hmm. you know, I have to deal with this and this and this, but then everybody has an exception, and then to get yours, you have to go along with somebody else's. And that's it. Tax, spend, and then they get elected. It's worked pretty well for them. I'd like to prove that there's another way.
Yeah, that would be interesting. It would be a lot of sleepless nights in Washington, D.C., I'm sure, if that came about. So there have been rumors lately and talk here and there about a North American Union being formed with Canada, the United States, and Mexico, and to basically erase the northern and southern borders of the United States. Have you been keeping up with that? issue?
Yes, and it's surprising how few people, members of Congress, know about it, or if you tell them, believe it. Yet, I bet you've come to Texas and talked to the average person now in Texas since they've heard about the highway and they've sent a message to our state legislators that it's becoming better known. But in April of 2005, I believe, the presidents of Mexico, United States, and Canada got together and they laid out this plan for the Security Prosperity Partnership, which was an outgrowth of the NAFTA agreement. I'm not opposed to free trade. Like I said earlier, if you trade with people, you're less likely to fight with them. But I don't like these international trade agreements because you lose your sovereignty, whether it's a WTO or they're NAFTA and these various trade agreements. I think they're designed to help the special interest big corporations. And the North American Union plan has come out of the NAFTA. It was first the NAFTA and then the SPP. And those individuals who would like to put three countries together are the ones who are very, very weak on immigration. That's why they just as soon, send our border guards to Iraq and forget about our own borders, because quite frankly, they're not worried about that too much. And they would like to just put the three countries together. And it sounds so radical that people say, well, that just is not true. But that's what happened in Europe. They eventually did that, and they're having some very serious problems from that. But there should be a big difference between political unity versus friendship and trading with people. To me, there's a big difference of that. And they're talking about political unity. And they've already had a name written about what the currency would be, and it would be the Amero. But let me tell you, it won't be backed by gold. It's going to be backed by a political political unit called the North American Union, and economically and politically, it's bound to fail.
Since the Warren Supreme Court, the Supreme Court of the United States has been moving full speed ahead, usurping the authority of your body, the Congress of the United States, and some presidential authority. Would you have any plan as president to curb the runaway habits of the Supreme Court of the United States?
Yes, I would. The first thing I would do is encourage the Congress to pass a bill that I've introduced, and I'd be very willing to sign it. And it's a bill that eliminates federal jurisdiction on many of our issues, such as prayer in school. Congress has been admonished that Congress shall write no law regarding this issue. And there could be some arguments and debate on how you handle that, but it should be a local issue, it should be a school board issue, a community issue, or whatever. But I want to eliminate the jurisdiction. I'd eliminate the jurisdiction, say, on abortion. I don't want to have the national abortion police. I want it to be local. I want to repeal Roe versus Wade, because it was the taking of our Texas law that reversed that trend and made it a national law. It demonstrates how the Supreme Court can legislate nationally. Sometimes they can do right and you say, hey, that's good. Now we have a national good law. But most likely they're going to rule poorly, and then it's a national law and it's a bad law, and that's what they did on Roe versus Wade. So whether it's, the issue of marriage, that should be a state issue. It shouldn't be, the only time the federal government should be involved on an issue like that is when we're dealing with federal programs, like the Defense of Marriage Act, and that's a good law. I wasn't there when that was passed, but that tells you that for federal purposes on federal law, marriage is that union between a man and a woman. But for the other things, I would defer to the states, and this can be all passed with a law and not with a constitutional amendment. And that particular piece of legislation is called We the People's Act, and I think it's a good approach. It would be a way of accomplishing a lot of these things and taking the jurisdiction away from the Supreme Court, because we haven't come out, I guess on occasion we come out okay with the Supreme Court, but for the most part, I think the people end up with less freedom rather than more.
Well, Congressman Paul, it's been a real pleasure to have you with us today, and we thank you very much for your time, and good luck in the coming election.
Thank you very much. It was great to be with you.